Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Shamir Duverseau from smartpandalabs.com, and they're all about bridging the gaps in your digital customer experience. They are all about the journey optimization process, and they love to do things like split testing, digital transformation, omni-channel marketing campaigns, all the good stuff. So we're going to have a fun conversation talking about what Smart Panda Labs does and how it's important for you and why you need to be jumping on some of these marketing techniques yesterday in order to get to where you want to go in the future. So Shamir, glad to be talking to you.
Great for having me. Thank you, Robert.
Very welcome, and thanks for coming. And so, what is on your mind these days? What's your passion as far as your company and your own personal self, and just the infinite possibilities for growth in the future? What has you fired up?
A lot of stuff has me fired up. When I think back, I guess over the course of my career, and I think about Smart Panda Labs and what made me start Smart Panda Labs, it really comes to a lot of frustration I had in my corporate life, which I know is not by any stretch of the imagination a new story, but a lot of frustration in terms of working with different partners over my corporate life, and the partners not really filling the gaps that we needed filled on the corporate side, not making that connection that needed to happen between the different groups that I worked with. I'm with marketing, especially now in the corporate and the digital world, the corporate world, that connection between corporate and marketing and IT really was a challenge. And I just didn't find that people were filling that gap. So that's kind of why I started Smart Panda Labs, to really be able to help companies fill that gap, to help them alleviate that frustration and get things done and really create those experiences that matter.
And so what was that frustration and that gap? What was that like? Was it a matter of like communication, or like the project portal was not good, or like what frustrations were you coming across, and how does Smart Panda Labs fix those things?
It's like just people who speak two different languages who can't communicate. It's like marketing spoke French and IT was speaking Sanskrit, and they just couldn't get one thing across to the other. So marketing had these ideas that they had, these visions for what they wanted to build or what they wanted to design and how they want to work, and they just weren't able to effectively communicate that to IT. On the flip side, IT just wasn't effectively able to ask the right questions to really understand what marketing wanted. So they extrapolated and kind of sort of tried to figure it out. And then in the end, a lot of money was spent. Marketing was frustrated. IT was frustrated, or just kind of ready to walk away because it's like, hey, we built this thing. That's what you told us. That's what you asked for. So really, Smart Panda Labs was built to say, you have these campaigns, these advanced campaigns nowadays that you really want to drive and deliver. Whether that's, again, marketing automation, whether that's personalization, whether that's experimentation, A/B testing, all those things involve some semblance of technology. They involve customer data. A number of different systems have to be touched. And marketers just typically don't do a good job of being able to articulate what that is to IT so that IT can work with them as partners to build or implement what it is they need. So we come in and we help fill that gap. We kind of understand both languages. We can speak French. We can translate that to Sanskrit. And we allow that translation to be able to get things accomplished and done in a meaningful way so that things can really move forward.
And it really, the way you describe that, it really seems like a software development lifecycle problem, right? Where it's like you have it in plain English, what you want done, but then your mind fills in the gaps with all the everyday language. And it seems almost like tedious to like fully and like over explain what it is that you want to create. And then from the plain English description, there's like the software spec. And then from that, there's the actual work gets done, but then you go in and debug and iterate. And so did you make it as far as coming up with the frustration and then building the solution with Smart Panda Labs? Is it still a work in progress, or have you innovated? Have you changed the world as far as this new solution?
I'd say we're somewhere in between. I mean, there's still a lot of kind of old school thinking out there, which can be a lot to deal with and kind of manage as you start to work with large enterprise corporations. But a lot of times we're able to make progress. We're able to get systems established. We're able to get campaigns running the way that they envision them running. And you kind of alluded to it, right? There's kind of two big parts here. So first is like getting that foundation set and getting those things running, getting those tactics out there and executing the way you want them to. And then the other one, which has probably been more of a challenge that we've still trying to help companies figure out, is, okay, well, how do you develop a process here where you're executing, you're measuring, you're testing, you're iterating, and you're constantly improving that. Again, old school thinking, a lot of times it's set it and forget it. It's like, we built these things, it's running, it's going great. If there's a problem, we'll just throw more money at it. We'll advertise some more, instead of saying, well, let's look at what we've built. Let's analyze how well it's working, and let's experiment and see how we can make that better. So it's really working with companies to get those two things going, that foundation that's in place, but also that framework to integrate and experiment and move forward. And I think the foundation part, I think we've kind of cracked that nut, and we can get that going pretty well. The framework, that usually takes a lot more work, a lot more heavy lifting with the companies and partners to be able to get that really rolling the way that we want it to.
And what's your kind of method to the madness as far as getting these two sides of it built? Because I imagine there might be like a lot of like having conversations or looking at what they've already tried, or what's kind of like worked good enough for them up to this point. And so like, what's your thought process? Are you like, I'm going to schedule some meetings, I'm going to get some writing done? Like, how do you even begin to look at this huge problem in front of you?
Yeah, a lot of times it comes with starting at a higher level than perhaps they're used to starting at, maybe with a marketing agency. So you come in and there's certain metrics you want to hit. Maybe there's a certain amount of leads you want to get, or a certain amount of sales, and all those things are certainly important. But a lot of times it's taking a step back and just kind of saying, okay, what's important overall to the organization? What are the organizational goals? What are the things that are important to the board or the CEO or to investors or stockholders? What are those things? Now let's make the connection between what you're doing in marketing and how that rolls up and affects those things. And once you kind of understand that connection, then it becomes clear of okay, now you have these tactics. How are these tactics affecting those metrics that roll up and affect those bigger goals that you want to accomplish as an organization? What's the gap to being able to deliver the tactics in a way that makes sense? Let's define those gaps. Let's roadmap that out, and then start to execute that roadmap in the right order. Because a lot of these things are complicated. They're not going to be done tomorrow. They're not going to be done next month or in 6 months. But you can iterate your way there. And it's like, well, if we can do this first, then we can do 2, and then we can do 3. Then eventually you kind of get yourself rolling. So that's kind of how we look at it. Become very high level, make the connection, find the gaps in terms of what's not happening to be able to deliver on that, and then eventually roadmap that out and then execute on it.
I like your thought process, and what's going through my mind is I'm almost like digesting what you just said on 3 different levels, right? There's like the level of what you literally said and what you and your company do, and then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, how can I myself apply this to my business? Because that's kind of what makes the information really stick when you say, well, how is this useful to me? And then also I was thinking in like bigger picture life terms, just in general, in the sense that you say, well, people are caught up in the day-to-day, the way it's always been done, putting out fires in many different contexts, right? But just in general, we all kind of fall into that problem, that crutch of just every day it's kind of going through and it's a mess. And there's all these things that just kind of happen over time. And that's just how we've been going along. And you say a really effective problem-solving approach in many different scenarios is to say, okay, let's take a step back and let's figure out, like, what do you want? What are your goals? What are your objectives? And maybe this handful of daily activities were sort of getting you there, but let's like start from scratch and say, what are your goals really? And then kind of put things into different boxes and say, okay, now what do we put in place and how do we get there? And then it seemed like near the end of the thought process here, you said, now how do you put it on a timeline? Because it's nice to make things look nice and bright and shiny and have a plan, and the plan looks perfect, but then, okay, well, when will this get done in a timely fashion, and when can we get started on some of these things? So it's really cool to hear about your thought process and kind of get a taste of how you think. And so it's also fun to hear about kind of some real life case study success stories, right? Because it makes you and your company look good, and it kind of tickles the brain to think like, oh yeah, there's all these interesting, fun companies out there and problems are solving. So do any fun case studies come to mind as far as some company where you and your team jumped in and cleaned up the mess and made it work really good? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think we had one client in travel industry, and their challenge was, frankly, they were trying to get sold. They wanted someone to buy them. So for them, showing revenue, showing profitability, building up the value of the company was really important. So those were those higher level business goals that really mattered to them, right? So when we looked at that and they wanted to engage us to help them with experimentation specifically, Well, now that helped us kind of prioritize and say, well, what should we be testing here? And we need to be testing these things that are maximizing their revenue, these things that are maximizing what money they're spending in advertising. So how do we drive more without them having to spend more, right? So that they can show that on their books, which ultimately is going to make them more appealing to those who are buying them. So we were able to start a great experimentation program with them. We did some really cool experiments on their main website, some great A/B tests that were able to accomplish that. That really drove up revenue per visit, that increased their conversion rates at some key points. And again, they were able to maximize what traffic they were already driving to the website. They didn't have to say, well, okay, well, if we need to increase revenue, we're going to need to spend more. That's the easy way out for marketers a lot of times. This was a great opportunity to say, well, you can increase the results in the back end without having to throw more money at it in the front end, just by making the experience better. And because we knew upfront, like that's really what really mattered, was about driving that revenue and profitability, we were able to focus experimentation on that and see some great success.
And how did you come to that conclusion of saying, let's split test and optimize the landing page? Did you like look at what they had set up and look at the competitors, and you're looking for the low-hanging fruit? Like, how did you arrive at a conclusion like that?
Yeah, so some of it was looking at best practice, right? Just in terms of how their site was set up, how their conversion funnel was set up on their site versus what we saw just in the industry and what's considered best practice. Some of it was data driven for sure, in terms of just seeing where people were exiting, where people were leaving that process, so where we saw kind of bottlenecks in the process. I remember one of the first tests we did with them was around the button you click to actually enter the booking funnel, enter your payment information. So the button you click right before you actually enter your payment information. And it was funny, one of the most successful tests we had with them was just adding some micro copy below that button that just said, your credit card isn't going to get charged yet. The first idea we had was actually to change the copy on the button itself to make it not so intense. I think it said book now, and we changed it to be like, enter your information. Test failed horribly. Within 2 or 3 days, just saw terrible results. But what it told us was that step in the process, what we say there matters a whole lot. It's just we weren't saying the right thing. So instead, we kept the copy on the button. We added some micro copy. It completely flipped things around. Again, a relatively minor change, huge impact in terms of driving revenue and conversion. Again, no incremental spend. So it was really about kind of looking at the data, looking at best practice, and kind of, it's art and science, right? It's a combination of those two things. But again, testing is iterative. So you get a loss to get a win. And getting that first loss taught us something about the importance of that copy and that step in the process. We iterated on that idea and we were able to get a win.
I love stories like that, especially how split testing always drives you crazy as far as you change something that you think is not very significant, but makes a huge difference in the conversion rate, good or bad, right?
Yep.
Removing a video or removing a few words out of a headline, changing a color, and you always think, would that really make that much of a difference? And then, as you know, from the checking the data, it does. And then it's also cool to hear about that story in particular, because you said, okay, here's what's already set up. And by looking around at best practices, et cetera, here's what's missing. And then so there's what's missing and what needs to be added, but then there's also like your approach to get there, right? Like you said, you wanted to add this little bit of micro copy. Do you add it on the button? Do you add it under the button? And as you said, it requires this iteration to sometimes do the false starts or make the mistakes to arrive at the conclusion, because it's really easy to be a self-defeatist and say, oh, well, I tried this, it didn't work. I needed to add this little bit to make the checkout page convert more, and it's not even worth it. And you said, no, well, let's have some finesse or look at like, well, the end goal and however this looks is what we want. But then the different kind of approaches we tried, this didn't work until we finally kind of arrived at the data-driven science plus the creative art of using your noggin and kind of trying to blend the two. And so you've seen all these different things in all these different industries. You've done all this fun stuff with playing with the system and conversion rate optimization. Do you see any low-hanging fruit that we're all really missing out on? It's something that no one's talking about, no one's doing, but then in your travels, you keep seeing just like, this is really missing in the marketplace right now.
Yeah, I mean, as I kind of alluded to, we really focus on companies that are in those earlier stages of digital transformation. So they're really needing to figure out those things to get themselves started. So these are the companies that are seeing the Amazons of the world and all the cool things that they're doing. And they're saying, I want to do that. Like, I need to get started to do that. But they have no idea where to start and no idea how to kind of get started with that. And probably the biggest thing that those organizations are missing, and these are large, enterprise organizations, well over $1 billion in revenue, is experimentation. It's using experimentation to learn and to grow. And there's this fear around doing experimentation. Either just a fear just out of just ignorance and just not understanding it, a fear of experiments losing, which, as you well know, most experiments are going to lose, not understanding the need of getting that learning process going, because yeah, you'll get 2 or 3, 4 losses, but what you learn from those losses will eventually lead to a win that will more than outweigh those losses, right? And it's a matter of embracing that, of understanding it, of getting comfortable with it, and then saying, okay, we're going to invest in this and put this into place. And what you talked about frustrations early on, marketers love to throw money at problems. We love to throw advertising money at problems. Everything is an advertising problem. It's, leads are low, sales are low. Okay, well, we got to spend more on Google. We want to spend more on Facebook. We got to spend more on LinkedIn, wherever the case may be, instead of saying, well, the person only spends a fraction of their time interacting with the ad. The overwhelming majority of the time the person spends is post-click, right? They click on the ad, they're spending time on your site. They're looking at the product, they're looking at the service, looking at different pages, they're adding things to cart, they're checking out. That's where all the time's spent. But then we spend all the money on this thing that only happens for a few seconds instead of optimizing what happens after the click in that process. And I feel like that's a huge miss on just so many companies, so many large enterprise companies that just haven't learned that. And if they really want to, get ahead and they want to be the Amazons of the world, that's what Amazon's doing. They're experimenting constantly because they understand that making all those changes, testing how people are interacting, segmenting their audience, personalizing, all those things are the things that are really driving revenue and profitability.
Amazing. Don't just throw money at the problem, because if it's already not working or it's just barely working, then it seems like that's creating more problems for yourself, right? You're just multiplying those frustrations that are already there, versus embrace the many small failures, which failure seems dramatic in a testing kind of scenario, but failure is what it is, but small failures, so that way you can get on that path to the win. And then embrace experimentation, which I agree with you. It's it sounds fun to me, right? Throw in a new email campaign, try out some new landing pages, and there's just that fear of giving up the old to go for the new. And it's like, but you don't have to give up the old for now. Try the new campaign, try the new landing pages, the new ad copy, the new offer, etc. You can do this new thing that's just an experiment off to the side. And if that takes on a life of its own, if that eclipses what's already working or shows promise, then you can play around with swapping things out or transitioning over. But it's just an experiment. See what happens and enjoy the process. And so if someone is looking to get things where they need to go, if they said, I've gotten this far, but it's been a mess, it's been disorganized, we've had the mistakes, we need a team like Smart Panda Labs to get this business really humming, get this campaign really working. How does somebody know if their company is a good fit for you, and how do they find you and reach out?
Yeah, I think what you just described is exactly how you know it's a good fit. You have this vision for where you want to be and where you want to go, and you're just not clear on how you get there. It's a bit overwhelming to get there. There's just too many hurdles to jump, too many elements and pieces and parts that you just don't understand of what it takes to be able to say, oh, I want to be able to do that. When something as simple as, when I go to here on this retail website and I'm there for, and I put something in my cart, and I get this email a couple of days afterwards saying, hey, buy this thing you left in your cart. Like, oh, I want to do that. I just don't know how, right? When you see those things and you realize that there's too many gaps, you just don't understand how to get there. Those are the companies that we help. Those are the companies that we work for and do work for on an enterprise level to be able to do that. And you can reach out to us on our website, smartpandalabs.com. But even follow me on LinkedIn. Just even follow me and see if you like how I'm thinking. If what I'm saying resonates with you, just do that, just to get a sense of, yeah, this makes sense to me. And that way, if we're a good fit before you even have to reach out and contact us.
And I personally do like your thought process, because you're making me think about, well, I should go and look at my competitors, or I should look at the load time on my web page, or I should just revisit what that customer experience is like from what the ad looks like, and what the landing page, and how they're finding me from like organic traffic. And when they're on the web page, how easy is it to click and buy? Or was I just setting up a web page really quick and not really giving it much thought, and looking at it now months later with fresh eyes, there might be a problem in the conversion. And so I like your mindset there of revisiting what's already been established, and say, well, this was your first stab at it, but there's probably a more refined, thought out way to get to where you want to go in both the small scale and the large scale, right? Small scale is, let's get that abandoned cart figured out, or let's get that conversion rate working better. But then the big scale is, where do you want your company to go? Like that one business you mentioned where they said, well, we want to be acquired, right? We want to sell the company. And that's just like this huge goal. And there's like 52,000 steps to get from here to there. And Smart Panda Labs can fill in that gap there. So smartpandalabs.com. And then to add Shamir on social media, we'll spell out his name real quick. That's SHAMIR. Last name is Duverseau, DUVERSEAU. Shamir Duverseau from smartpandalabs.com. By the way, Shamir, as we wrap up, why Smart Panda? What is the reason for that? What makes a panda so smart?
I wish we had a good story behind the name. If you knew the guy who created the name, you would understand where the name came from. It's just like one of those personalities. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was a combination of words that really sounded well together. It made sense for us to be a lab because we're into experimentation, we're into trying new things. Pandas, because we hope we're likable, and pandas certainly are. And we'll hope we'll be able to be smart and help people figure things out. So we put the words together. They resonated with us. It sticks out and resonates with people. It's memorable. So we went with it.
The same way a marketing campaign comes together, right? There's different angles, different approaches. They say, does the hummingbird sing because he's happy, or is he happy because he sings? It doesn't matter. It came together with all these different pieces. And the way that your business can come together moving forward is by first going to smartpandalabs.com. Go there, read around the website, and when you're ready, click on the Get in Touch button to contact Shamir and his team and get that conversation started, because time is of the essence, because the time will pass no matter what you do. And if you sit around hemming and hawing and say, I'll get to it in 6 months, 12 months, then it'll never get done. So it's time to get your business in gear and get it to where it needs to go. So go to smartpandalabs.com. We will see you there. And thank you, Shamir, for showing up and having some really cool ideas and stories. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. This was great. Enjoyed it.